Alright guys, this is the last one in the series of these 128s. I'll probably do like one or two more just on some sound design things using them, but this is the last type. These are grain 128s. So start at the beginning of this series if you haven't seen these yet. But basically we're going to work with stacks of samples, and now this time we're going to be able to scrub through these samples and change the loop length on these samplers and make it all granular when we want to, and all sorts of cool tricks. So I have this template which I'm going to give to you first off. But besides that, I just want to sort of walk you through what it sounds like or some of the things that you can get out of it, and then I'll show you really quick how to build one. It's very easy once you have this template. So, alright, so this is just some MIDI from Black Octopus. Right, I didn't write this, but anyways, this is the notes. So see what happens when I move some of these knobs, right? Right, so there's pretty much an unlimited number of timbres you can get out of this thing, and what's going on is we've got 3 different banks down here, and this one I built the drone that's behind it all myself. Alright, so let me just show you, show on browser. Oops. But you can see all these guys. Right, so I made this big long drone with just a bunch of notes C and 2 copies of exhale, and sort of staggered these notes, and so it's different things of exhale, which is a vocal synthesizer, and I got this big long drone, which I then chopped up into 8 different pieces, and then I crossfaded between them. Right, so if you're just looking at this middle bank, right, that's what that is. And if you move this selector knob, you can crossfade through these different long samples. Each one of these is quite long, right? And if you move this knob, it will scrub through the sample, right? So to show you what I mean by that, right, if we're all the way, say here, then we'll be at the very first sample. And you can see right here, right, and the reason it's dying out like that is because I have, this sustain down. Cool. So you get the point. So this this basically scrubs through the sample. This is the length of the loop. Right, we can have it go back and forth if you want. Right? And so then this happens on every single layer, and so then we can crossfade between these layers. Oops, sorry, this is the banks. Alright, so say like this. Like this. Blend them like this, right? Right, so you can already see there's a lot of potential. And then I had these other two. These were drones by, I think, Audio Imperia and Cashmere. And so I did the same thing with these, right? And so then we can layer these in the banks. And so with all the crossfading of the layers and the crossfading of the banks, you end up getting like 4 different layers blended together, kind of how you choose, right? So then you can see this, right? We're going to bring in this cashmere thing. And we can also, remember, scrub through these samples entirely. Right? So it's really, really flexible. You know, I love it. This is a new technique that I've developed, and it really lets you get a lot of interesting things, especially once you start automating these guys, right? So, and modulating, right? So there's, say we keep this loop length here, we can either automate or modulate. Modulate is doing a percentage of the value, so oftentimes I'll modulate this guy, for instance, right? Not like that timbre. Let's change. Cool, so that's kind of nice. Right, and so then we could modulate this and have it sometimes be really slow and sometimes be longer grains. Right, and we can even automate these guys to sort of move through this. And the center is the main vocal one that I built. So it's kind of the best sounding in my opinion. Alright, maybe put back in that right, and we can also automate, you know, this loop start, which is going to you know, change where in the sample that we are. Right, and just sort of get rid of anything that sucks, basically. Now, the other trick you can do is, and I'll show you this while I take you through what's actually going on, is the magic happens in this aux envelope for determining loop length. So you can see this loop length, and when I drag up loop length, right, if this was not being modulated, right, so let's just play one that's not being modulated. But then you can see this loop length, right, we increase it, it gets longer, right? It only goes up to like about 20%. I actually have this set up differently per bank, and the reason is these vocal ones are quite a bit longer than these guys and these guys, and so by doing the macro differently, I can get the grain sizes to be a little bit more in sync with each other, right? And so if you look down here, this loop length, some go from 0.5 to 25, some go from 0.1 to 20, some go from 0.5 to 30. That's just calibrating it. I don't do that in the template I'll give you, but I'll leave that to you to do if you want to adjust how the grain size works for each one. But that's what's going on. These only go up to 20% because I feel like I don't need that long of loops, like not like the whole sample. So it gives me more sort of resolution on the granular stuff. So what's going on with the granular stuff then is it's really just a short loop length, right? And to get to choose where the loop actually happens, we need to change the loop start. So the actual loop start is happening at like 25 milliseconds in, and I do 25 milliseconds, right? All I did is I highlighted all of them and I went, 25, and it's usually best to have this on off, and this can be either of these, depending on what you're looking for, right? But by 25 milliseconds, you can get as long as a 25 millisecond crossfade, right? And so that will help straighten out some of the edges, especially if you're in repeat mode like this. If you have a crossfade of 0, then it's going to maybe not click, but kind of click every time it repeats, which will be often, right? So, all right, let's take off. Right, so if we increase this crossfade, it's like more of a consistent tone, right? Right, so that's why I did that. You can't, if your loop starts at 0, you can't crossfade it, just because it starts from behind the starting place, so it goes from behind the starting place, and that's what it fades with the end of the loop. So you need to have some room behind yourself in order to even crossfade, right? But then I have these two LFOs, and what these LFOs are doing is they're moving very, very slowly. Like it's 100 seconds to sweep through these things. And the reason I have two is because without one of these on, the loop brace, right, where the loop starts, is going to slowly drift forward, and it's going to cycle through, the whole 100% within 100 seconds, right? Because this is a frequency of 100 seconds long. So if you have another one going the opposite direction, they'll cancel each other out and they'll stay still, right? So that's kind of the behavior that you might want, is for it to stay still, and that's why I have it programmed this way. But sometimes you do want it to move forward, and the cool way to do that is if you this should stay basically still. And what you can see going on is that we've got these two envelopes moving in opposite directions, right? This phase is actually only phasing the other one. And this one is just basically counteracting the drift forward in the loop start, or in this case, actually the drift backwards in the loop start, by moving forwards, right, from down up. Now, if I want it to drift, I can actually control the amount that it drifts by lowering this, right? So if I lower this to like 80, right, and it's, can be good to lower this to 80, but it actually doesn't matter as long as you have retrigger on. But now you can hear and see that we are drifting forward slightly, right? So that's because we aren't drifting back as fast. Right, so if you want to drift forward, you can just move this down. So there's a downside to using this loop start here in order to change the speed at which it's scrubbing through while it's looping granularly, right? And I like it like this. This is what I think is the kind of best way, but you can. It does cause one problem, which is as you lower this, you're actually going to move the loop brace back. Right, so you can see that we're here. If I drop this down quite a bit, it'll be easier to see. Right, so you do move further and further back. So one option to cause it so that you can choose whether it moves forward or even backwards is to actually set these at 50, and then if you move this up, it will move backwards, and if you move this down, it'll move forwards without disrupting the initial start point for the loop. Right, so even if we put this down at like 0, we'll move backwards faster, or if we put this at 100, we'll move forwards faster. Now, the problem with that is if you have this set at 50, then, when you pump up the loop start to 100%, it's only going to modulate it 50%, right? And so it's only going to get you halfway through the sample, which might not be desirable. That's why I usually keep this on 100%, right? And this would be 100%. And then you can drop this to move it backwards. Right, but I feel like it gets a kind of a cooler and more natural sound as well if you cause it to scoot forward, which again you can do just by dropping this. Right, so you can move backwards, but this is going to change the loop start point. So there's really nothing to be done about changing the scrub forward and back and changing your loop start point. You just kind of have to adjust for it with this loop start knob, get back to the place in the sample that you want. But you can move forward in time by dropping this down. You can move backwards in time slowly by dropping this time down, or you'll stay steady. Yeah, but besides that, I mean, like it's very, very versatile, right? You can accomplish a whole lot with it, right? So I'll just take you through a handful of different, tricks that I like to do. But there's, making things granular by really small values of this, and it will work differently if you have it in this loop mode versus this loop mode. So you can control that with these, right? So you can change everything to that loop mode or that loop mode, right? I showed you about these crossfades. You can change that to make it sort of sharper in terms of the way it swaps. If you're in back and forth mode, that can actually sound really good. Right. It can be nice to put a pitch envelope on one of these. For instance, if this one you put a pitch envelope of say 24, it's just going to dive down from 24, right? Then on this bank over here, rather, you'll get right, so it's going to go down no matter what. And so you can crossfade that in with your vocal samples. All right, we still have that. Right, maybe that's too much. We can get, so it's just subtle in the background. Right, so the way I did this FM, I'm probably going to start doing it like this on my other 128s, but it's a little bit tricky. I want to take you through it just so you learn how to do some of these macro mappings. So this FM level is just this oscillator level, basically. It's controlling the depth of this sustain value. Right, so it's just the amount, but the magic happens here, right? And if you notice, it's on fixed mode right here, right? Which is when you have just a fixed frequency and it's not a multiple of the pitch, right? If you pull it back to left, it actually switches into off of fixed mode, right? And so this FM would be at a quarter of the frequency of the note I'm playing, which is a C, right? And as you move this up, it will go to 0.5 up to 1. And very briefly, it will go to 2. Right? And then from there, though, it will switch over into fixed mode, and then this multiplier is also going to change. And so you have to multiply this against that to get the real frequency, but see what it does. So I'm going to put this all the way up so you can hear. Right, so check it out. Now it switches to fixed frequency. Right, and let's just go here so it's easy to hear. Right, actually, it's not going to be easy with this. Let's turn this pitch envelope off. Right, and so you get the multiple of 10, the multiple of 1, the multiple of 0.1, and the multiple of 0.01, right, 1/100th. And so the way I've mapped it, it basically gives you quite a bit of range for how much wobble you want, right? So what you'll notice is if we are on this back and forth mode, the pitch mode, when you're going backwards, kind of switches the direction it was going, Right, so let's listen to it when we're just playing forward really quick. Right, it's got a nice smooth pitch envelope up and down, right? We're frequency modulating up and down. If we do this, it's going to change the direction that the pitch is going, and it's going to sound like it's going up and then back up and then back up, or down, back down. Right, so you'll have a more even FM if you are on this mode, but it can be really cool on the other mode to sort of have it like be jumping around a little bit like that, right? Right, and again, we can make this faster, slower. It's really got quite a few ranges that are useful. Right, and I'm just have this all the way up to sort of exaggerate it, but if you do it just a little bit, it just adds some texture. So it can help to pull these back to the point where there's no more silence, right, so that this knob works better. Right, and I'd actually probably pull it back a little bit more. And even push it up just a little bit here. Right, and so we can make this sound really good in a lot of different ways, right? We can have it sound clean and awesome. We can have it sound, gritty and dirty, and we can modulate and automate in between those things pretty seamlessly, even in the course of a MIDI clip, So here's how you make them, right? It helps to get samples that are just one pitch, right? And I don't mean just one pitch for all the samples, but that's what I did here, is these are all just a C, right? And so because of that, I don't have to change anything in terms of the roots, but if they are different, if the different samples are different keys, then you're going to have to change where the roots are, right? And so you can see that going on here, right? This is an F sharp, this is a G sharp. But if the loop itself, or the long sample that you're making these grains out of, changes pitch, then as you scrub through the grains, it's not going to be honest with the pitch that you're playing, right? So it helps to have just one pitch going on, and then you can set the root value and it'll stay that. And it helps even more if you have a bunch of samples that all just stay at this value, right, and evolve. And so that's why I made this one out of those exhale samples, right? Just because it keeps changing timbre, and it's all really useful because it's kind of like vocally, and that's, makes really good instruments, right? So that's why I put this one in the middle, right? And then I've got these other two as sort of support for this. So I sort of think about this as this is the one I made out of the exhale samples, and then I've got these other ones supporting it, and I sort of crossfade away from the middle. But yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. You drop these in, you would correct the roots if you don't have them. This is, I'm going to show you how to get the crossfades working nice. I did those for you before in the banks, and I will still have templates for you that have the banks crossfaded in different ways, right, where there's only one bank, two banks, etc. But I haven't really shown you the efficient way to do the crossfading, right? And so I'm going to do that now. So what I like to do is I go in one from the outside on both sides, and then this top one right, needs to be all the way just one thing here, and the bottom one needs to be all the way just one thing on the very right side. Then you distribute ranges equally for the middle ones, right? So you get something that looks like this. So then you would select all, and you'll do your best to sort of pull this into the middle, right? And also this one into the middle. Got it? So this isn't great. I probably should have gone like one fewer, right? Like here probably would have been nice. And then here. Right, and then so I kind of gauge whether this is approximately as long as this, right? But once you got that, still highlighting them all, it helps if you work with a middle one like this. So you pull this over here, and you pull this back here. Oops, not too far. Right, now you'll notice this one got messed up. That's going to happen because this bumps up against the wall when you pulled it left to begin with, so you kind of got to fix the ends. Right, so I'd pull that back, you know, I'd move this one, and you know, now we're done, if we want to call it done. I might move these a little bit just to make them a little bit better. Like this one, I would, in particular, I'd move like 2 over this way, right, and I move like 2 this way. Right, I'm just trying to get the crossfadings on these end ones more even, right? Like this should be like 2 longer, and so I can like make this shorter. You know, I'm gonna have to shift this back in, shift this back in, but it really only happens on the end ones. So even if you have a lot of these, it actually is still okay. But it's kind of better also to just work with, you know, 8 to 15 longer samples for these as opposed to like 128 or whatever, so that you've got as much resolution in the crossfade as possible, and then you've really just got a lot of action in terms of evolving the timbre in where the loop is, right? So you don't need so many of these guys, but it is nice to you know, have quite a few of these, right? So hopefully you got that. The key is, you know, get these one from the inside and then drag them in. And most of everything will go automatically, but the insides and then one from the inside will often get messed up. All right, but once you have that, here, let's record on this one. So pull back to this bank. Right, the only other thing to do is this sample stuff. So on the sample page, we want to select all these, and like I said, it's usually best to keep this off. But you want one of these 2 settings, right? And then, like I said, I like to go, if this isn't samples, turn it into seconds mode, right? I like to go 25 milliseconds. I find 25 is usually as much of a crossfade as I need. You can always move it up higher if you need, but you know, you can adjust this, but you need this to be at 25 before you can do that, right? And so once you have that, right, pull down the loop length if you need. But yeah, I mean, that's all you need to do. Obviously, I only did this on one bank. The real trick is finding good samples, right? And that's why I made this one myself. Drones work pretty good if you've got drones or atmospheres by people. A lot of times those will just be on one note, so that could be useful. But it's good to have something that evolves in texture over time and that produces a fairly long loop, right? And so what I prefer is engaging in sound design and just playing a single note, right, and then twisting knobs and such, right? And so in this case, I was just hopping through different presets in Exhale. I wasn't even like twisting knobs and whatnot. But you know, if you were working in Serum, for instance, you could hop through different presets on that if you wanted, or you could like twist the macro knobs, or you could program something that's designed to have a lot of variation in timbre as you manipulate different parameters. Right? And then you could have just one big long sample that is evolving in its timbre, and that's really what you want here, so that you can get all these different timbres as you move this loop start point, right? So hopefully this was informative to you guys. I'm going to provide this template for you. Yeah, make these things because they're super powerful. These are probably the most powerful of the 128s in terms of all the different things that they can do. They aren't very hard to make either. You can see how quickly I filled in this bank and we were just done. As terms of making these samples, it really didn't take that long. Like I said, I was just sort of smashing through different presets in Exhale, and then all I did is I chopped out the silence, right, and then put some limiting on it so it was nice and thick everywhere, right? You can see how thick it is everywhere, but just to get it sort of even and full. And I layered that with these other ones, and that created this very powerful instrument I can use in dozens of different situations. All right, so hopefully you see how useful these things are. Again, these 128s are really game changers. There's a lot of different options on how to set them up, but the general principle of having all these stacks of samples instead of individual samples, and having the easy layering and the easy sound design options all at once, it really makes them powerful instruments that you can custom build very quickly and just produce better, more interesting art quicker, right? Some of these sounds are going to be very hard to produce in other ways, and you can still get clean, beautiful stuff as well. But yeah, you can really the sky's the limit with these. So hope you enjoyed this one. Take care.